And we're going to be taking a look at the COVID-19 watch and just see where we are at. We're going to delve deeper into how this disease will affect you while you're infected, and more importantly, after. There are some long-term effects that are going to affect you if you get it. And of course, as the world tries to figure this out, there is speculation about the possibility of a vaccine being gotten right now. And of course, that will take time before it gets down to the third world and this country, of course. So it is the honors it is on everyone to keep taking care of itself. So let's take a look at this story just to bring us into that particular discussion. The world could be inching closer to finding the vaccine for the coronavirus disease after researchers disclosed some breakthrough after months of testing and trials. This comes as 461 new COVID cases were reported. 7 more people have succumbed to the virus, while 51 more patients have been discharged from hospital.
Na kati ya hizi masampuli ambapo tumepima 461 zimepatikana kuwa positive. Kwa jumla wale watu ambapo wako nchi na ni positive ni idadi ya 11,252. Nairobi ina watu 248, Machakos 97, Kiambu 20. Pia leo tuna furaha kuwaeleza ya kwamba tumeshawacha kutoka hospitali patients 51, na kwa sasa tumefika wale watu ambapo wameshapona kwa hii virusi, idadi yao sasa imefika 3,068. Tumepoteza watu 7 kwa hiyo ugonjwa, na inaleta ile idadi ya watu ambapo wameshafariki kwenye hii ugonjwa kuwa 209.
So this Moderna vaccine has gone through phase 1, where it was tested in just a small number of people, and out of the 45 people who were given the vaccines, all of them developed an immune reaction. They produce antibodies.
Right, now joining me for that particular discussion is Dr. Thumbi Mwangi, who is a epidemiologist, that's quite a mouthful, and veterinary officer, who's going to give us an insight on cross-species infections, what that curve is, where we are at, and of course how that virus will affect you. And on the medical side of things, we also have Dr. Simrat Shah, who's going to be joining us via Zoom to tell us about how this virus actually could affect you in more ways than just one. If you survive this virus, if you're treated, you go through everything, does that mean the fight is over? And what is the possibility of you getting infected again? Welcome to the show, gents.
Thank you.
Now, I'll start with you, Dr. Thumbi. Let's talk about the coronavirus, and let's just start from the basics. Why are we calling it the curve? We always talk about flattening the curve, but this has to do with the statistics and the rate of infections and how many people are being affected. So for the sake of the viewers who are watching us from home, could you explain to us what this curve is?
Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this discussion. If you think about the first case that we got in the country just around March, the middle part of March. And then we had new people being infected as they came into contact with persons that have been shown to be positive. What happens is that as you get more and more people infected, means that if you're walking, say, in the streets of Nairobi, the chances of you getting into contact with a person that can pass the disease to you really do go high over time. And what happens is that after some time, you have so many people infected within a population that you get a lot of cases happening at once, and the effect of that is that you end up having really a high peak of number of people that are infected at a single day. So for instance, now we are ranging somewhere between 200 and 400 cases that you can see per day.
Yes.
So when you talk about a curve, it means you're looking at the trajectory of how infections are growing within a population. And at a certain point, it will be that we have enough people who have been infected that the cases start going down. Right. So when you talk about the curve, is that trajectory that takes the cases up and then they start going down.
Right, and when you look at certain nations that have put in measures to ensure that they're protecting themselves from coronavirus, we have a curve that goes up and then goes down, and then when they think they're safe, they open their economy, because this is one of the concerns that comes with coronavirus, and then suddenly we see an uptick. Tell us about that and the possibility of that happening in Kenya, given that we have eased those restrictions.
The way to think about that is you only get a case because you have a case.
Yes.
So a case begets a case. So once we know that you have a lot of cases happening, you can actually stop the things that cause you to be infected, which would be contact with the infected persons. And that happens by imposing, say, things like travel restrictions or social distancing, the wearing of masks, or even completely making sure that people don't come into contact with each other, which I think in many places has been referred to as lockdown.
Right.
Now, if a nation is looking to completely, get rid of the cases, then they need to be in a lockdown for a long period of time, such that all the people that are infected at one point will end up having recovered or whatever happens to them, and you have no new cases happening.
Yes.
Now, when you open up, what that does is that you bring cases that are infected and start contacting people that would get the disease if they come into contact with the infected person. And that's when you see, again, the number of cases going up.
Yes, and so basically the question would be, how flat should that line be before you actually relax those rules? Right? I
think that's really dependent on different nations and different objectives of the government.
Okay, now let's talk about cross-species infections. This is a virus that has been said, as far as we know, that it emanated from animals and crossed the species line to human beings. And before I bring in Dr. Simrat Shah, I'd like you to tell us, just explain to us how this happens, and of course other examples of this, of diseases that have actually come across that particular line.
I would start with a really fun fact. We have almost 2/3 of all infections in humans having originated from animals. So that means that there's really a close relationship between what we have as humans and what animals have got. That group of diseases, we refer to them as zoonotic diseases, and they happen mainly because some of the pathogens, for instance, the coronavirus, are able to survive within the body of an animal and also the body of a human.
Yes.
I think the problem really is when you have an infection coming from animals into humans and no longer requiring humans to transmit. So like the example of coronavirus, we no longer need the source of the virus that was there at the beginning. We just transmit the disease within the human population. And there are many really great examples of that. We have some that are really common within Kenya. We can talk about, say, the one that comes from dogs to humans called rabies. You have another one that comes through milk called brucellosis. And you've got even diseases like malaria and HIV initially are all thought to have come originally from animals, but no longer requiring humans to transmit. I mean, no longer requiring animals to transmit.
Right. Now, Dr. Simrat Shah is joining us via Zoom. Doctor, do you think or rather, it's quite obvious actually, when you look at these cross-species infections, they're pretty hard on the human species. When you talk about HIV, you talk about rabies, we have COVID-19, SARS, MERS, they're not something that humans are resilient against. Could you explain to us why this is? Dr. Shah, can you hear me? I think we're having a technical hitch. You're going to I'm going to throw that to you, Dr. Thubi, to explain to us why we aren't quite resilient against these viral infections.
The way to think about it is once you get a new infection to you, your body is able to develop a fighting mechanism against that infection.
Yes.
Now that takes time. And for some infections, they are quite clever. So they keep changing the way they look so the body is unable to, in a way, recognize the pathogen and be able to deal with it as it should be. So the big issue here is some of these infections, like you mentioned, MERS, SARS, and now the coronavirus, is that our bodies have never seen them before, so we are all naive. And so when it comes to us, before you can all develop really immunity, it does cause havoc, as you're observing now with the big pandemic.
Absolutely. Dr. Shah, can you hear me right now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so my question right now is, why aren't we very resilient against infections that cross the species line? When you talk about rabies, HIV, and now COVID-19, MERS, SARS, it seems like it takes such a toll before we find a vaccine or we are able actually to fight it off. Explain to us and the viewers at home why this is.
You see, when we talk about vaccine, we are talking about list of trials. You see, there are 4 phases which we conduct in for any vaccine for that matter. In fact, I would say we are just 6 months away from getting to know about coronavirus, and we still already have phase 3 trials going on for COVID-19. I think that's the biggest thing that happened in the history ever, because to manufacture a vaccine, first you need to know what is the virus. We need to know the entire genetic study of the virus, which was in fact got to know within matter of 2 months of getting to know about the coronavirus, which was the biggest thing ever happened in the history. And after that, starting these trials, what we need to know about vaccine is making a vaccine is very easy today. But what is more important today is to understand what are the side effects of the vaccine, what are the long-term effects of these vaccines, to understand how long is the immunity going to last with these vaccines, whether they have any long-term side effects of these vaccines. Can you give these things in pregnant women or not? Is it going to have any impact on the newborn babies? There are so many things which needs to study, and that's what takes a long time to have these vaccines into the market, because we have to start with the animal trials, then we start with the human trials, and they conduct trials on the small number of people, then a large number of study, then only then you get an approval from FDA to release it into the market. Because what is going to happen is we are going to use this on human beings, and we cannot take a chance with these vaccines having side effect disaster than giving some effect of it. That's the reason why it takes a...
Yes, but before we get to the virus, Ted, there's the hope that the vaccine stage, there's a hope that your body can fight it off. But when we look specifically to these particular virus, it's quite difficult for humans to fight them off. Why is that? Is it because they have not experienced it before? Could you explain to us the physical limitations that we have when we're exposed to these new sorts of viruses?
Sorry, can you come again?
When we get a cross-species infection, a virus coming from an animal species coming into the human species, it has been documented that it's quite difficult. So before the humans get some sort of immunity or get to the vaccine, we have a lot of devastation across the world. Let's take the example of HIV. Let's take the example of SARS and MERS. Why is it that the body is quite weakened, even for healthy people? As we have seen with coronavirus, it's quite difficult for them to fight it off on their own.
Yeah, see, these are viruses. See, coronavirus is not a new virus. If we talk about coronavirus, it's an old virus. But what happens is they have genetic drifts and genetic shifts happening into these viruses, especially when they jump from one species to other species. And then when they are genetically mutated and then they are transmitted to human beings, we don't have immunity assays developed against these viruses because the genetic mutation is seen. Just see what happened in SARS, what happened in MERS, or say H1N1 strains, H5N1 strains. All these strains, they have a genetic shift happening in them, because of which we don't have immunity against these things. And to develop immunity inside the body, or if we say to cut down the transmission, as we talked about herd immunity last time, it should be at least 80% of the population to get infected. Only then the rate of transmission comes down. So it's going to take a long time for us to develop immunity against these viruses, especially when it is a new virus.
Absolutely. Now, when you look at coronavirus, we are not unscathed after it has taken its toll on our bodies. Could you explain to us how one could be affected, how their life could change, even after they manage to beat this virus?
You see, post-coronavirus, what is important is that we still continue to maintain the basic measures what we have learned now because of coronavirus. Because post-coronavirus, we have seen that even after you are tested negative, there are chances of you shedding the virus for the next 10 days. A new study which was conducted by Wuhan University showed that even those people who were tested negative were shedding these viruses for the next 10 days and infecting other people. So what is required is post-COVID-19, you go back to quarantine for at least 10 days. There are some complications seen because of coronavirus being affected, and long-term effects are also seen because of this COVID-19. And I think there is a long way to go to understand these side effects. There are some things which are seen in the form of lung scars and heart attacks and many things coming up, which we need to look over a period of time.
Now, we're going to get into those specific conditions that you might develop post-COVID-19 after you have been healed and given a clean bill of health. But I'd like to throw this one over to Dr. Thumbi, who is in studio right here. Could you tell us, why is it that with COVID-19 you experience reinfection, while when we talk about other diseases, we have some sort of immunity to it? There is the perception that once I get it and I survive it, then I'm done. But this is not the narrative when it comes to COVID-19. People have tested positive even after being given a clean bill of health.
I think the answer to that lies in the pathogen that you're talking about. And I think there are many examples. For instance, we know that even when you get a cold, you can get a cold again.
Yes.
And that sometimes your body develops immunity against a disease, but that immunity is not lifelong. So, for instance, if I got measles, I would be assured that, over my lifetime, I will not get measles again.
Yeah.
But there are lots of other diseases that the immunity that you get from the body only lasts for a period of time.
Why is it? Does it mutate? Why is it so strong against the human immunity?
Sometimes it's because the virus or the pathogen keeps changing its coat, because the way the body recognizes a foreign object, it sort of looks at, what's the coat of it, how does it look like, and then has a picture of it and is able to develop things that are called like antibodies against it. Now, if that virus keeps changing its coat, then it becomes really difficult. It's sort of a cat and mouse game between the body and the pathogen. So sometimes you succeed for a period of time, and after some time, the virus has mutated or become something different that your body needs again to develop specific immunity for it.
Dr. Shah, would you explain this phenomena, the reinfection, and of course how now you would fare against this virus if you got it for a second time? Would you be weaker? Would your chances actually go down?
Yeah, if we talk specifically about coronavirus, there was a study being conducted in Spain, and the antibody titers in those patients who were infected and then tested negative were checked. On series of investigation, it was found that at the end of 3 months, no antibodies were found in these people, which means that the antibody titers are going low, and which means that there are chances of getting reinfection. You see, let's understand the concept of reinfection. Like we talk about hepatitis B. When we talk about hepatitis B, we give them vaccines, shots of 0 month, 1 month, and then 6 months. And then we keep giving them boosters every 5 years. This is because the antibodies present in the body, they start coming down. That's why we have vaccines developed like influenza vaccine we give every year, because it was found that after 1 year, the antibody response was coming low, and then your chances of getting infection are very high because those antibodies in your body are going low. That's the reason why we vaccinate every year for influenza. Just consider measles as discussed. Like once you have it, you have the immunity forever, because those antibodies were found to stay in your body for the rest of the life. But that's not happening with COVID-19, especially when we saw this study from Spain. It is still unknown whether we are going to develop antibodies lasting for 3 months or we are going to have antibodies lasting for 1 year. Exactly the same thing happening with the vaccine also. We don't know how much antibody response you need to develop immunity against it. We don't know how long do you need these antibodies in the bodies, or how long these antibodies are going to be present in the body after the vaccination so that you're protected. That's the reason why we are still under studies and we still don't know the exact nature of this disease. But as of now, till date, there are...
Dr. Shah, you're saying something?
Yeah, I'm telling, as of now, there are very few cases which have been reported of reinfection. As such, what is being seen is the second wave of COVID-19 or third wave of COVID-19. But reinfection as such, we don't know much about it because there are much more trials to be conducted about it.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Dr. Thumbi, could you explain to us what he's talked about, the waves and how they are, where we are at as Kenya right now?
If you think like over hill, we are beginning to climb the hill. So we
beginning at 10,000 plus.
Yes. So the estimates of the number of people that have been infected is much higher. So we are on that steep curve. Now, the more we keep testing, the more we'll find. But the idea, really, like Dr. Shah mentioned before, is that at some point there have been enough people who have been infected that the chances of coming into contact a person who has not been, a person who is infectious goes down. At that point, you start seeing the cases going down. The estimates for this is, that the peak would be somewhere in the last quarter of the year. So you're talking September heading towards November. And that's really dependent on how much we maintain, social distancing. If we completely lose on that, what happens is that you have a lot of infections happening together and you have a much higher peak that comes much sooner.
Okay. Now, when you look at the landscape of Africa in general and Kenya, we do know that vaccine, if it is indeed they come up with it soon, it will take a minute before it comes down, trickles down to Africa because of course, the economic situation we have and also the protectionist approach that a lot of first world countries have put in place. So how would it be difficult for us to fight this on our own? And at the same time, and should we have any hope of this being our solution, or should we just take matters into our own hands? Not by taking concoctions like some countries are, but, medically proven measures.
And that's a really difficult question. What COVID-19 has shown us is that, countries have sort of retreated to themselves and thought about themselves more than even the neighbors. There are obviously World Health bodies like World Health Organization that will try and advocate for almost equity and making sure that the vaccines that, for instance, rise from this work, that they are distributed really to everyone that needs them. Obviously, I think it's going to be a bit difficult. So in terms of thinking what is the future for us, perhaps as an African continent, I think it's our governments investing a bit more so as we also play, in research and in healthcare.
Yes.
So as we can play in the league where we are able to protect the health of our people.
And would this then prepare us, if you use the case study of the Congo and Uganda, prepare us adequately for any future possible infections? Because those countries had Ebola to deal with, and it seems that they were more prepared than the rest of Africa. So should this be a lesson to be learned?
Yeah, I think we have even benefited, even though we have not had Ebola cases here. Our healthcare workers here have gone even to Liberia and other places that have had big epidemics of Ebola. So I do feel that even if it doesn't happen to us, there's a level of preparedness that we get out of having our neighbors having this kind of infections.
But COVID-19 would prepare us ideally for any other sort of epidemic.
I think so. The benefits of the health system being pushed and people being trained on how to deal with these very infectious agents are going to be beyond COVID-19. If we have something in the future, I think we're better prepared than we were when this started. Okay.
Now, Dr. Shah, I'm very curious about the treatment of COVID-19. Let's just start from that level, because people have quite elaborated from their experiences, and medics have talked about how the treatment itself could cause damage to the body of someone who has been treated for COVID-19. And we're talking about, let's start from ventilators, because there's certain side effects moving forward after you're taking off it that you might face after you're treated for it. Tell us about that.
See, when we talk about treatment of COVID-19, we are all just doing trials about treatment of COVID-19 because we still don't know what is the exact cure for it. What are drugs being used is, we use HCQS, there are so many drugs, antivirals being used. But if we talk about the post-COVID infection, are you asking me about the post-COVID infection?
No, I'm talking about how someone who has been who has used a ventilator, who has had a period of time of their treatment in ICU and they couldn't breathe and there was need to use a ventilator, but at the same time, the same form of treatment incurs some form of damage to their lungs or their chestal areas. Could you tell us if this is accurate or not?
Yeah, you see, there are so many studies coming up which say that ventilators are not required for patients who are having COVID-19. But, I don't agree with these studies, because what is required is when your oxygen levels are dropping, when the saturation is dropping, you have no other mode to ventilate a patient than putting the patient on ventilator. There are so many settings which are to be used for patients on ventilator. Here, the settings of ventilator are completely different than what we use for normally people who are going on ventilator. So the lung damage is considerably, I will not talk about more of lung damage because it is going to definitely help you to survive than talking about the lung damage, because definitely ventilators have their own side effects, but the effects are going to be much more useful than side effects of it. Because if you don't put a patient on ventilator who is not able to maintain his oxygen saturations, he is definitely going to die within the next 2 hours. But if you put the patient on ventilator and try to maintain the accurate measurements what are required for ventilator, try to put the positioning what is required for ventilator, then definitely it is going to be useful than harmful.
So basically what you're saying is that we should look at it like any other drug that has side effects. You're always given that little list of side effects. So that is how we should look at these, this sort of form of treatment.
Yeah, because effects of these drugs overweigh than that of side effects. You have no other choice. We don't have any other medicines to use. So I think we should not consider more about side effects of it. We consider the effects of it. No doubt we choose the drugs based on the background of the patient, based on the background clinical condition of the patient, whether he has a heart disease, whether he has a kidney failure. Based on that, we definitely use the medicines which are required. But the effects of these medicines and ventilator is going to overweigh the side effects of these medicines.
Okay, now let's talk about the lung damage that would come after COVID-19. You've been given a bill of health, but some people have reported having shortness of breath. Even studies that have taken a look at people who suffered from MARS and SARS, there is shortness of breath that would have them even keep coming back to hospital for treatment. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, when we talk about COVID-19 infection per se, we are talking about those patients who are having post-COVID lung damage, who are having a severe form of disease. You see, 3% of population who are affected by COVID-19 are going into severe form of pneumonias. So these patients who have severe form of pneumonia, who go on ventilator and then recover and come back, these patients are found to have lung scars. These patients are found to have something called as fibrosis in the lungs. And this fibrosis in the lungs is a permanent damage. You know, across the globe now, there are 3 lung transplants being conducted for COVID patients who had a permanent damage to the lungs. But when we talk about this, it's a very small number of population who is getting affected to that level. I would say less than 1% of population who is affected by COVID-19 will have these kind of complications. And even those who are having less than 1% of population, they can have lung scar, they can have fibrosis, they can land up with bronchiectasis in future. All these things are going on in trial, but definitely there are studies which show that you can have permanent lung damage, especially if you're having a background history of diabetes, especially if you're having a background history of uncontrolled diabetes, wherein the lung damage is more severe.
Thank you very much. That is Dr. Samrat Shah, who's a general physician and a regular on the show, who gives us his insight on COVID-19, among other